TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
This is the Truckers Network Radio Show. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and our guests today are Bidgette Riedel and David Henry of the Crazy Canuck Truckin podcast. We've been talking about what inspired it. David, we had a few technical problems. Could you elaborate on what inspired this really cool podcast?
Well, I was, when the pandemic started, all the work that I've been doing as a mental health advocate dried up, of course, because we can't see people and do speeches. And I was listening to the radio stations as usual, and it was just so much bad news all the time. I just had to stop. I turned my radio off in April, and I haven't turned it on again since. And I started listening to podcasts. Then I started listening to podcasts, and I thought, hey, I could do a podcast like that, and but do it about trucking, nothing current, just have like sitting around a fire, having a chat outside with a beer, or having a drink of some kind, or, you know, just, and have it slanted so that people can get some help and feel better about things. And I thought I need somebody to co-host with me, because my brain locks up sometimes. So I thought, oh, I knew Bidgette Riedel, and thought, well, I'll see what she thinks. And here we are.
What he didn't tell you is he just wants somebody who talks a lot.
You guys do great. and you work remotely when you're putting all this together. Bidgette, yes. you're in just outside of Fargo, and where do you record, David? Are you on the road when you're doing this, or?
Most times I am on the road somewhere. Occasionally I'll be able to be near an office that has good Wi-Fi, but usually I'm recording it in the cab of my truck, like I am today.
What I liked, you have little 10 codes you were explaining and so forth. You try to educate the listener in addition to having somebody that's talking about stories, and I like that. Who came up with that idea?
I think that was a little bit mutual, because some of the folks that we polled and said, hey, we're going to do this, what would you like to hear? And folks said, kind of demystify some of the things that we think about with long haul truckers. And you always hear people say 10-4, right? Even at the end of a text message or a voicemail. So we just started doing 10 codes for fun, and I keep checking them off the list every week.
There are quite a few of them.
We have our own language in trucking, and that was one of the reasons to have Bidgette, was that when I would get too much into trucker lingo, I need somebody to stop me and say, hey, wait a minute, what are you talking about? What does this mean? What are you talking about when you say 10-20? And what's your 20 today? So that was kind of part of the inspiration through it, is just try and clear up some of the things that we talk about as truckers, so other people can understand.
By the way, David, earlier when we were having technical difficulties getting you on the air, I'd say you were definitely a 10-1. We were receiving you poorly.
Yep, that's a good one. So what is the 10 code now for transmitting well?
Wait, that would be, I don't know, what is it? I haven't memorized these yet.
I have the 10 codes somewhere, but not handy. Darn it.
Wait, that can be a trivia game. So someone can respond back to your Twitter account at Crazy Canuck and let us know what receiving well would be for a 10 code. I want to see who gets that first.
Excellent.
Yeah, that'd
idea.
be cool. Yep.
So what have people said about your podcast? I imagine that it's been really well received.
People have liked it. I had one time where there was somebody made a comment that they didn't like me using the crazy part, But that was a handle that was given to me a long time ago, and it before I got into mental health advocacy and stuff, and so it fits well. And other people have, that have been under stress these days have texted us or emailed us and had some suggestions, or it's doing what we envisioned, that is to give people a breath of fresh air.
And it really is.
So speaking of that, if I could share one, I got this message just the other day from a gentleman who follows our podcast, and he listened to most recently episode number 11. And he said, I just wanted to tell you that listening to your guest, Jason Hansen, telling his story of his crash, I had tears in my eyes. Funny thing was, I was feeling a little down, and after his story, I was like, I really need to cheer up, because after hearing what he went through and he was still so positive, wow, that's incredible. So folks, if you're having a bad day, there might be a podcast out there that gives you a lesson that makes you realize, I can be all right.
That's so cool. And that's so needed.
Exactly what we want.
David, what brought you into the idea of mental health advocacy? Is that a journey that you've been on for a while?
Yes, it's a journey I've been on because I was one of the people that said that there's no such thing as depression or people just needed to suck it up. They needed to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, put their big boy panties on, whatever, And I had a real bad head injury in 91 after some other head injuries as a kid. And I shouldn't have survived that one. And I went through the 90s thinking, I got this, I'm strong. And it wasn't good. In 2001, I had another head injury, a crash in a big truck down in Tallahassee, Florida. And then I started getting some help, and I realized how wrong I was. And I'm like, you know what? I got to get out there and educate people that were like me to open their eyes and see what the truth is. The truth is that we all have things we can deal with better. We all have times, just because you have a mental health illness of some kind does not mean you're weak. You're actually very strong to be able to survive that and to continue on. So it's been a steady progression. And then in 2016, I had another injury, and a therapist there, if you go back to episode 10, you'll hear about that. And she said, David, you got to get back to remembering who you are, and that is helping others and trying to teach others. And so I became way more vocal and started really speaking out about mental health. And it's not a drawback in any way when you have mental health issues. When you know what you're dealing with, you can use that to your advantage for everything you do. Your employers will make more money when they have a driver that understands mental health and how to look after themselves better, because then it impacts everything and everybody around you. It's not just it's not a drawback in any way at all. And to try and get that message across to employers, you can hire these people and you are going to do fantastic because they know their limits. They know what they can deal with. And for the employees, hey, we're all in this together. I understand where you're coming from. And you're amazing to be able to do what you do. So that was the long answer for it, I guess.
No, but it makes sense. And what you're doing is so inspirational. And it isn't being talked about. People, I think, have their own judgment calls on things. And this is creating awareness. And you're giving people possibilities that they never thought they could have. And your stories, it's. I like the way you've packaged all of this. This is a great way to message this to everyone.
Isn't it nice if you are out there driving down the road, maybe you're not having your greatest day, but to hear someone else say, it's all right. And there's others that you can talk to or listen to. And so I think that's really a good premise for us, is being able to hear those stories, and even better, they make you laugh. Every episode, someone has a story or an item that they share that makes us laugh. And that is truly one of my favorite parts of what we do.
Laughter is so important. The positive perspective.
For sure.
And especially this year, everybody really needs to be able to laugh.
Yeah,
yes, we do.
I'm not sure you realize that, David and Bridget, but oftentimes during our breaks between segments, we play comedy, and we always tell people we take our subject matter seriously, but not ourselves. And so, we enjoy laughter, and this year especially, as Shelley was saying, not a lot of laughter out there.
And there are a lot of people who really have lost hope, I think, and they are depressed. You're listening to TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned. This is the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. Our guests today are Bidgette Riedel and David Henry of the Crazy Canuck Truckin podcast. They have a refreshingly entertaining podcast that also makes you think. For our listeners who may not be familiar with it, what topics have you covered so far? And what do you essentially want to accomplish with this podcast?
How about if I cover the topics and David leads us into what we want to accomplish? That be fair?
Sounds great.
So as far as topics that we have covered, we have had an opportunity to talk with people who have been trucking and maybe aren't right now. So, for instance, Vince, one of our guests, he's currently raising bison in southern Manitoba. We have visited with Jesse James Dupree, who is an entrepreneur. He has his own band, and he sings our theme song. And he grew up riding in the back of the truck when his dad was over the road. We have talked to a great friend of mine because he and I are both in sales in agriculture, and we spend a lot of hours on the road. And Jason talked about an accident that he was in and the recovery from that crash. And there's been a plethora of other folks in between who have just brought us the chance to dispel myths about being ice road truckers, as well as just sharing the fun things that have happened to them while they've been traveling. But the long-term goal, well, that's David's.
Well, the long-term goal is to have something where people can tune in and listen, and they can get a variety of things. They can get some tips and ideas on how to handle things on the road, whether you're in a car or whether you're in a semi, and as well as a time of just listening and having a break from the bad news that's out there. We want to make you laugh a little bit. We want to make you cry a little bit. We want you to come away from the podcast feeling like you've just had a little chat with some good friends, and which we can't get together with as much in these days, and go away from listening to the podcast and think that was time well worth it. And we want to keep doing this and keep reaching out to people and keep inspiring people to continue on no matter what their circumstances are.
And tell us their stories. So for those who want to volunteer and say, I'd love to spend 45 minutes just shooting the breeze with y'all, why don't you reach out to us and let us know versus our Twitter account or our Instagram account? Because I think that would be great fun to hear what people are thinking and what they want to share.
Oh, absolutely. And certainly drivers see so many things. There's so many stories to tell, and they're inspirational.
There's a lot of things we run across on the highway that we can fool ourselves into thinking are no big deal, but they are a big deal. And it's okay to talk about that. It's okay to let it bother you, and you work through it, and you get on and keep going. And I had a friend of mine told me, and I said to him, I want to have you on the podcast sometime. He says, well, I don't have stories like you. I'm like, everyone has a story. I can interview anybody, and we will have a good time together, and we will get a great story from you that could help somebody else. So often we don't know how much of a help we can be to others just by being ourselves, you know. That's so important to me, is let's just be real. This is how people get help.
Absolutely. And right now, people are so isolated.
Yes.
They can't, like you were saying, get together with other people. And to feel like maybe they are, and maybe there's some sense of things will get back to the way they should be. It's not this weird sci-fi movie that we all seem to be traveling in. That's kind of what 2020 feels like to me. So.
And I think it turned out as a stroke of luck when David said, hey, I think we should do this. And it's been great for people to have those other voices in the cab that just maybe are comforting and are easy to listen to, but then also make you laugh and make you think and hopefully make you realize, I have great stories to tell too. Maybe I should share them.
Yeah. You know, I've always maintained...
I've had a couple of... Sorry.
No, please.
I've had a couple of emails lately from podcast headhunters saying, hey, I can help you book more high-profile guests for your radio show, for your podcast show. And I'm like, I have no shortage of guests.
Right.
And they may not be high-profile to you or to somebody else, but I guarantee you when we put them on the podcast, people are going to listen and think, well, that was really cool, you know? And well, we don't need high profile. We need real people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I've always maintained that every commercial driver does two things extremely well: tell stories and complain. There's just something about being a driver. You can drop out of that cab, or even if you're a rideshare driver, you get out of that car, and right away you're not going to believe what I just saw. You're not going to believe it.
You know, obviously it's a connection to agriculture too, because we can do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I laugh at dispatchers that think that they can win an argument with us, because we have hours and upon hours of sitting and thinking of all the arguments that a dispatcher is going to come up with. And the dispatcher doesn't have any time. He just calls up and starts talking to us, and he's already lost that conversation before he's even started. Yeah. And they're always baffled by that.
You know, you would think they would learn by now not to start the conversation with, how you doing? Because you asked, okay, so I'm going to tell you.
That's always a good one. Is how you doing? Well, you're calling me, so it can't be good, right? You know, and the safety guy calls you up. That's not a good idea for him to ask, how are you? Because you know what's going to come is not going to be a lot of fun.
Sure.
You know, so you just... Yeah.
So do you have any pointers for drivers in your podcasts on how to, as Tom likes to say, pack your patience? I love that phrase. And lower stress. And
you know, I think that's come up just by chance, that folks have said, here's some things that I do, or a tactic that I might have. And for example, we got an email from a listener who said one of the things that he does that helps just promote general goodwill is he carries teddy bears with him. And so he, of course, you guys as over the road folks, you often are the first on the scene at the site of a crash. And having something that can be comforting to children or young people is a great idea. Yeah. And it promotes that friendliness. I don't want this to be used in a bad way, but I think Terry does a fantastic job of just connecting with others and making sure that that human factor is always present.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's neat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you see something happen, don't pretend it didn't happen. You know, stop, take the time to process what happened, talk to somebody, you know, and let yourself deal with that before you go on down the road, because that's gonna come and hit you in the back door really hard. if you're not paying attention.
I think people have a tendency to go into denial or try to ignore things. And today, with everything being so digital, we feel so disconnected. And that sort of thing is something we need. We need to still be, remember, we're humans, and we need to connect.
Absolutely.
Well,
and
our social life in the past in trucking was when we would pull into a truck stop, and you'd be all tired, and you'd stumble in there, and you may or may not talk at the trucker's counter as you're sipping on some coffee, but that was therapy for us.
Right.
And we don't have that today because there's very few places that do that anymore. And so we need to still take that time to have those therapy sessions, those bull sessions or hen sessions, whatever you want to call them, and talk about these things that we're going through, and we're more connected as far as digitally and electronically, but we're less connected to the people, and we got to get back to that and remember that.
Absolutely. We may be more connected, but yet we're not. In many ways, it's made us more disconnected as a society and as humans.
Yeah, I even think that's part of the problem we're experiencing right now with some of the hate we see in America, because people are allowed to say, or people not allowed, allowed to say whatever they want, hateful things. Nobody knows who they are, and so they get away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be talking
about the old CB warriors. People would say things over the CB that they wouldn't say in real life.
Yeah, never.
We'll be back with more of these perspectives. This is really thought-provoking. This is the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and our guests today are Bidgette Riedel and David Henry of the Crazy Canuck Truckin podcast. We've been covering all kinds of topics. I wanted to mention, David, that I was really touched emotionally watching the tribute you posted for a fellow trucker. I think it really lends quite a perspective on drivers and how they rally. It was amazing. Could you talk a little bit about that video and what actually happened?
Well, I'll start with what happened. He was, I'm not sure if he was loading or unloading grain, but he had a grain trailer. And he climbed with the ladder on the back, like we always do many, many times throughout our careers. And something happened. He fell. My daughter and a friend of hers saw what was happening, or saw him fall. And she kind of freaked out, and she called me and said, "What do I do?" I said, "Well, turn around and go back there and see what you can do." So they went back and they started talking with him, and you'll hear their comments in the tribute video on Crazy Canuck Truckin' YouTube channel. And he seemed fine. He seemed like, he obviously some broken bones and things like that, but it didn't seem life-threatening. And he was in hospital for a week. They hadn't done surgery on him yet, and he passed away. 63 years young. He was a very good man. He was well-liked. And so the company and his brother said, let's take his truck out for one last ride. And while we like to present the image in trucking of being big, tough people that don't show a lot of emotion, we really feel for people that we lose in the line of duty. It is one of the most dangerous occupations, more dangerous than being a police officer, and we see a lot of carnage on the road, and that touches us deeply. And so when we lose a member of the trucking family, it's not hard at all to call a few people and say, "Hey, let's put together a convoy." And spur of the moment, with a few days' notice, there was 53 trucks involved in the convoy, and everybody it was a good time. And we had something in Canada we call sun dogs, when there's a halo around the sun because of the weather. And there's a picture on that in the tribute video of a beautiful halo. It's not as bright as on a really cold day, but it was still a halo, and it was very touching to see that above the convoy before we started.
It was very touching. And I must admit, I had a tear. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And you guys did this spontaneously, and you were there to honor one of your fellow truckers. And that shows people, too. You know, people do care. They may not say it, but they do. And it looked like there were owner-operators there and fleet drivers and everything, which means their companies let them take the day to honor one of their own. I mean, just, wow. That's all I can say. And it was really cool that you caught that on videotape.
Well, I didn't have a lot of time, but I knew I wanted to capture some information. I had my daughter was doing some videotaping for me, and we just used the phone and thought, you know what, we can put something together. And I wanted to interview them a little bit, hear their thoughts. And, our truckers really care about one another. We can complain a lot and we can fight about things, but we are a big family. When something hurts in a family, you forget your family troubles and you come together, you know.
Sure.
And so that's really important for us as truckers to be able to do that. And I drive a company truck these days, and the convoy happened about 45 miles away from our office, and went further away. So, ended up about 60 miles away from our office one way. And I said, hey, I want to go in the convoy with my truck bobtail. And he's like, okay. It wasn't even a question for him. And I took the truck and went there and took some time out of my day. And he was like, you know what your run is? And I said, yep. I said, we'll get that done, and company owners very often are very willing to let drivers do things like this because they know how important it is for us. And we really appreciate that when the company owners let us do that. So
where would you like to head in this interview, David, talking about your podcast? What were some of the topics that you're going to be covering? Obviously, this is a lot about, I think, human outreach and awareness and making people feel better about themselves, which you're doing really, really well. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll give you a little teaser, and
okay.
For episode 12, we're going to have a young lady on our show who is a multi-generational trucking company owner. Her dad started the company, and she's involved in the company now. We'll find out more about that, and we'll talk more about that. And, with women in any industry, there's always that question of who's going to take over the company or who's going to run things. And sometimes guys seem to think that they're going to be the ones doing this. And the girl should just stand back and let them handle things. And so I want to hear her perspective on that and the challenges she has transitioning from one generation to the next and her vision for the future. And I can tell you what, she is on top of things. And it's really, I've known her for a few years. We've never met, but I've known her, and I know she's gotten some awards for different things. And I think that's going to be pretty cool. We'll go through some of the generational stuff and women in men's world, so to speak. And one after that, Bridgette doesn't even know this yet, but going to be somebody else that is agriculture related that also puts on a lot of miles. And it will be somebody that she is aware of, but she doesn't know yet.
I'm all for the surprise. and realistically, that's probably one of the most fun things about doing this is that you don't always know quite what's coming next. It's completely unscripted. So what the direction that we take might turn on a dime, and we don't know what that'll be like. But that it brings us in as an audience and keeps us interested because it's not going to be the same thing every time. And again, the parallels of what we see with over-the-road drivers and with agriculture and how intertwined we are is huge because we can't get our products to market unless we've got people hauling them, whether it's yourself as the farmer taking that commodity in or if it's the driver hauling the finished load. So we all need each other here.
Absolutely.
So with 2 minutes left here, how can people follow up, hear more about your podcast, and perhaps reach out to you? Can you give us some web addresses and Twitter feed and all that kind of good stuff?
I'll let Bridgette take that part.
Okay.
So for us, there is and please correct me if I get this wrong, David, but we have a website. He can go to, an email, crazycanucktruckin@gmail.com. It would be the same on Twitter as well as Instagram. And if looking for Crazy Canuck doesn't happen and you have trouble finding it, you can also look for me on Twitter at BMRiedel or just my name, Bidgette Riedel, on Instagram. And I'll connect you with David. We'll get your stories and your fun ideas out on the podcast. And more than anything, even if you don't want to talk to us, but you want to share something, we'll read it for you.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that is great. And also, we're connected via Twitter, right? Right, Shelley?
Yes, we are.
So they can find us via. If you can't spell Canuck, you don't need to write it down. You can come to our Twitter, come to theirs. You'll figure it out. We'll get you there.
Absolutely. I'd like to see you guys back on the show just to see how your podcast has evolved because I really like what you're doing. This is really inspirational, and people do need a breath of fresh air with all the negativity that's been out there this year and even the years before. So congratulations on what you folks are doing. I really like it very, very much. You've been listening to TNCRadio.LIVE. This is the Truckers Network radio show, and we've been talking to Bidgette Riedel and David Henry of the Crazy Canuck Truckin' podcast. If you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. It's worth it. You won't regret it.
TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Hi, this is Tom Kelly, managing partner of IMSICO LLC, doing business as TNCRadio.LIVE. The website TNCRadio.LIVE and any content or podcast related to the website are copyrights of IMSICO LLC, copyright 2021. All rights reserved. Any redistribution or reproduction of all or any part of the contents in any form is prohibited other than the following. We welcome you to download and play the publicly available podcast and share with others for personal use. Please acknowledge TNCRadio.LIVE as the source of the material. You may not, except with our express written permission, distribute or commercially exploit the content. And while we endeavor to keep the information up to date and correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind expressed or implied about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the website, the podcast, or the information, products, services, or related graphics contained on the website or podcast for any purpose. Any reliance you place on such information is therefore strictly at your own risk. For additional information, including details regarding monetization of this podcast, send email to podcasts@tncradio.live. TNCRadio.LIVE.